All right, so let me bring the other member of our webinar here, Patrick from Field Effect. He's my co-host for this one. Yeah, so he'll be walking us through the slide deck, right? But really giving us an idea that the whole point of this, it's called the evolution of cybersecurity, right? And I really like the idea of bringing in our partner on the cybersecurity side to be sharing this insight to all of you as the audience there. And then we'll it'll be a collab back and forth between both of us as we go through this, and then we'll have times for question and answers at the end as well. So Patrick, welcome. So it's good afternoon to you because you are out east, and good morning to everybody else pretty much on the call here. Actually, no, I see some other Ontario folks on the call too. So but yeah, anyways, welcome. And yeah, I want to hand it off to you and kick it off. Just, I guess, give a little bit of an intro. I'll talk about how we connected with Field Effect a little bit later on as well.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Matt. So hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here today to talk about cybersecurity, my favorite topic for sure. I work for Field Effect. We are a partner of Matt and Scout, and we are a cybersecurity company. We operate globally, but we are primarily Canadian. Our headquarters are in Ottawa, which is where I am right now, and over 70% of our employees are in Canada. Across the country.
You guys actually had an interesting sort of story of how Field Effect got founded, though, in regards to the founder. What he worked in the part of the government that I didn't even know we had.
Right. So did I, and quite a few of our people. So our roots are here in Ottawa through the employment that many of us had before, which was an arm of the government called the Communication Security Establishment, which provides IT security to the government of Canada and also foreign signals intelligence, which has a big cyber component. And those of us who played offense and defense there really got an excellent grounding on what the adversaries are like, how cyber criminals behave, what they do, how to thwart them, and that kind of thing. It's an excellent background for the company that we are today in.
Totally. What's the three-letter American equivalent of what you guys were in there?
The NSA, National Security Agency. There's also a British, Australian, and New Zealand version, and not coincidentally, those are the countries where we have employees, so that we can follow the sun and combat the cyber criminals 24/7.
Oh, at Field Effect, you mean in your SOC? Yeah, perfect.
In our SOC, yes.
Yeah. So there you go. For some of you, hopefully, I'm not the only one that didn't realize that we have a Canadian equivalent of the NSA. So that's the origins of Field Effect, and so yeah, we'll talk about it a little bit more. All right, should we get started?
Absolutely.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, so I'm going to start with this statement. It can be a little controversial. I'll say cybersecurity is not an IT problem. What is it then? What is it? Cybersecurity is a business problem. Okay, how can I get away with saying this? Because strictly speaking, cybersecurity has to do with bits and bytes and technology, and things going well and things going wrong. Why is it a business problem? Well, it's a business problem these days because when your cybersecurity fails or is absent, your business can grind to a halt. And that's what has happened with the advent of ransomware, where cyber criminals will come in and not just steal your information, but they will lock you up. And we see examples of this every day. There's actually a school board in Seattle battling it right now, this very minute. And they've had canceled classes and that kind of thing. It's happening every day to organizations of all sizes. So what we're going to do, what I'll do with some help from Matt, is we're going to look at cybercrime, this pervasive problem. We're going to discuss why cybersecurity is such a challenge, although I will point out it's a solvable one. We'll look at some common assumptions and how secure are we? And finally, we'll discuss cybersecurity as a team sport. All right. Excuse my phone ringing in the background. We're going to talk about some cybersecurity or cyber crime being pervasive. What do these companies, we'll start here. What do these companies have in common? Well, okay, Samsung, Microsoft, NVIDIA, some of the biggest tech companies out there, huge, successful. You've got Uber, you've got some telecoms, you've got some video game companies. What do they have in common? They were all hacked in 2022, okay? They were all breached by the same group of cyber criminals who just happened to be children doing it for fun, okay? So it's kind of an extreme case, but even these very, very large, well-defended organizations are vulnerable. Now, let's look a little closer to home. These examples are both from 2023. I know I experienced the chapters Indigo 1. So both chapters, Indigo and Sobeys, part of Empire Foods, had very significant breaches that affected their point of sale. They had to go down for a while, then they had to go to manual. These are both publicly traded companies, okay? And they have to report their financial implications of an attack like this. And in both cases, they were about $50 million hits to their bottom line. So very, very significant. Now, we can make the mistake and think, okay, it's only these big companies getting attacked. Well, it's only the attacks against the big companies that hit the news, okay? They are going after everyone. It's a crime of opportunity. If you're on the internet, you're potentially a target. Now, a little closer to home, at least for those of you in BC, many of you would be aware of the London drugs hack that happened in the spring. So 79 locations were closed for a little while and then slowly came up to speed. At the end of the day, they didn't reveal very much. We don't know a lot about exactly how it happened, but we know they were presented with something on the order of a $25 million ransom demand, which they refused to pay, and the cyber criminals leaked employee data, which is never fun. And then the First Nations Health Authority out in BC just reported last week, gave a little bit of additional information about a breach that happened in the spring and again, it's the exposure of personal data. There wasn't a ransom paid, but data getting leaked out there that you really don't want to have leaked. So, those are organizations that we're seeing things about in the news. Small and medium enterprise, it tends not to be reported, but they are going after SMEs and a huge proportion. Now, this doesn't mean all of these attacks were successful, but over 60% of organizations were things were attempted against. When an incident occurs, the average cost is over $1 million, sometimes much more. And once they get at you, they're going to come at you again. So there's a little double jeopardy there where cyber criminals will go after the same victims over and over. And sometimes it works because they don't put enough preventative measures in place.
Yeah, we were talking about that yesterday as well, right? About how the SMEs, it's easier phishing in some sense for some of the bad actors, right? Because there's so many more of them compared to the large enterprise, and quite often they're a lot less protected, right?
Yeah, and the good news though, so that's the bad news. The good news is that it takes much less to secure an SME than it takes to secure a large corporation. So there's a lot of hope there. It's just steps do have to be taken.
There you go. Here's the optimism slide right here.
Yes. So we're going to look at some of the reasons why cybersecurity is hard, but I do want to say up front, this is not a doom and gloom story. This is about awareness, right? All of this is solvable, especially for small and medium enterprise. So first of all, network complexity. Okay, so starting with COVID, of course, we had this rush for people to work from home. All of a sudden, organizations' infrastructure in some cases doubled. You have people working in the office and at home. You bring your own device. You have lots of use of cloud services. The actual networks that we're using are less understood than they were before. They're more complex, they're more complicated. So complexity is unfortunately our enemy. And part of the reason Field Effect and Scout are here is that we tackle that complexity for you.
What's the term again, Patrick, for when we shifted all to the hybrid and work from home, it extended the barrier
threat surface.
Is that what that's what they call it? Yeah.
The threat surface. So The threat surface is a term we use to describe how any of your organizations look from the outside, okay? And a big organization, just by virtue of being so large, being multinational, they're going to have a very big threat surface. Smaller organizations have a small threat surface, but there's still things that the cyber criminals can see from the outside. And there are things you can do to reduce your threat surface by making it, less vulnerable. And that's an ongoing activity we'll talk about.
Right. Yeah. I mean, just by nature of people having to work outside of the office, it's not like they're additional they're kind of additional endpoints that are vulnerable, right? But it's just the organization is having to open up these doors for people to work remotely, essentially, right? So it makes it more challenging. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. At the same time, we have a lot of technology out there that the cyber criminals can harness. It's getting easier for them to do this, and so they are scaling. They are going after more people faster. Okay, whereas before they maybe had to do a lot of handcrafting of things. They can automate, malicious email attempts against a broad variety of people. They're going to look better. So basically, the velocity and sophistication of the attacks is going up. So that's not great. And finally, cybercrime pays, unfortunately. There is a lot of money to be made. Some of these groups make $200-300 million American a year. This was really facilitated with the advent of Bitcoin. Okay, so 10 years ago, we weren't too worried about this. 5 years ago, it started to become a little bit of a problem, and it's just snowballed. So when a company is held ransom, the ransom requested is in Bitcoin, which is very, very hard to trace. Not impossible, but hard. And then the money will flow to places where the RCMP or Government of Canada has no chance of recuperating the money. Like some of the money it's almost like drug cartels. Some of the money will stay locally. A lot of it is going to Russia, to North Korea, in some cases China, to places where they're out of the reach of our law enforcement. Okay, and we'll wrap up this part by talking about some of the assumptions that people have when it comes to how prepared they are. One thing they will say is, I have backups in place, I'm good. And okay, backups are super important because that's where you're going to rebuild from in the absolute worst case scenario. You never want to get there, but backups are really good. However, guess what the cyber criminals will do? They're going to go after your backups. So you need a specific kind of backup that Matt and his team can help you with. An offline, what we call an immutable backup, something that is backed up periodically and that they can't touch. Okay, so that's one thing. Antivirus and firewall. Okay, I have those, I'm protected. Unfortunately, that's no longer true. You need those things. Those are like basic building blocks, but in 2024, that is nowhere near sufficient. The sophistication of the attacks has gone too far. These will prevent the basic attacks. These will not prevent the more advanced attacks that we're seeing a lot of. Okay, point 3, cyber insurance. I have cyber insurance in place. My organization can survive a breach. Well, it's good to have cyber insurance. It's harder to get these days, okay? And it's important to understand there are limitations when you do have it. There are limitations to how much they're going to pay out. They're not going to pay you for lost revenue. And when you attested, when you have to do a self-attestation when you get cyber insurance, if it's just like with getting health insurance. If you didn't declare a pre-existing health condition, if you didn't accurately describe how you're defending yourself, and then you have a breach, when the cyber insurance company looks at you, they can and will not honor the claim because it's like a pre-existing health condition that you didn't declare. All right, 4th point. I'm going to be able to tell if something is wrong right away. Unfortunately, this is really not true. These cyber criminals, when they get inside, they try to be as quiet as possible. Okay, they're going to want to look all over, get their claws in your network, and then bring all the valuable information out. And at that point, the way you're going to find out, and this is the way most ransomware companies find out, is that they get these screens that show a skull and crossbones saying, you are compromised, we're holding you ransom, here's how many Bitcoin and where you need to send it. So that's often the first sign, which is far too late. And then the final thing we'll see is, this mindset that, oh, someone's got it covered. Okay, my IT people have this covered, or my MSP has this covered. And in certain cases that might be true, but it often is not. And as the problem has gotten worse, it's gotten beyond the ability of individual IT teams to manage. It's gone beyond the ability of a lot of MSPs to manage. MSPs need to do what, like what Matt has done, which is take on a very capable cybersecurity partner. And it's that partnership actually that will make you resilient and strong in the face of these threats.
Yeah, I've had a couple real world examples from some of these. So I have backups. I'm good. I just met a prospect this week where their MSP, small MSP, like a kind of a loan consultant type deal. Anyway, his systems got encrypted, and so did his clients' systems, which is like the worst case scenario. This is the kind of thing that would keep me up at night, right? Because we are a bigger target. Bad actors know that if they can get to the MSP, they can get to all the clients. But the other problem with that assumption is that if you don't have, like Pat mentioned, the proper backup setup, they can encrypt your backups too, and then you're totally hooped, right? So that's one. And again, like I said, real world prospect just coming to me last week. That happened to them. And the cyber insurance, the analogy I like to make on that one too, like, well, it's like any insurance. Like you've got it, but you don't want to have to use it, right? If you have to use it, it's too late in that sense, right? And there's lasting damage. It's the same with an offsite backup, right, that we have for our clients. That's a disaster recovery plan. I mean, you shouldn't have to touch that ever unless there's a disaster, right? That's what it's for. It's not just your data backup in case somebody deletes a file. That's your disaster recovery. And cyber insurance kind of falls in the same thing, right? So you don't want to rely on that in that regard. Yeah, and the last point there about someone will manage this internally, and Pat talking a bit about the MSP dynamic. I mean, the thing that I've noticed over the past 5-10 years as cybersecurity has just become more of a real thing, right? Like as IT MSP, we're an outsourced service provider on the IT side. Our job for the longest time has been to support our clients and make it as easy and accessible for them to do their job and get access to their data, simplify their life. That's our whole purpose, right? And to streamline things and solve problems. So this whole cybersecurity, trend, whatever you want to call it, it goes in the face of that, right? Because so many of the security best practices aren't simplifying your life. They're not making it easier for you to access your data, right? They're a barrier in many ways, and so it's just as things have evolved, it has to be looked at differently, right? There can't just be the assumption that Scout is protecting against everything, because our focus isn't like if we were so just so you guys understand the context, there's MSSPs out there, managed security service providers. Their only role, not to make your life easier, is to make it as hard as possible for anybody else to get access to your data. Our role is to make it as easy as possible for you to get to your data and do your job. So there's this there's this balance that makes things challenging. But we'll talk a little more about that balance a little bit later.
So in speaking to people about cybersecurity, this is the question we get all the time, right, Matt? The most fundamental question, which is, how secure am I? And that's a it depends question. And so where do you start? There's a couple of common sense things to start from there.
Yeah, I mean, this is the question that I've been getting from my clients, every time that there's a new breach in the news, right? And 3 years ago or something like that, and prior, I would have a hard time answering this question, because I'd be like, well, I mean, things are advancing, we're doing this for you, you've got these good layers in place, but I really can't tell you how secure you are. And it wasn't until about 3 years ago when I was first exposed to a cyber framework assessment, right? So CIS is the name of the organization that creates this framework. And it's just a comprehensive end-to-end. There's 158 different sort of controls where it looks at, the security stance of your organization. And so, that really opened my eyes and made me realize that that is really the only answer to that question of how secure am I? And it is, well, you have to have an assessment to be able to answer that, unfortunately, right? Because it's previous to what we're talking about here and what I've created, it's expensive and it's very complicated and time consuming and all that kind of stuff, right? And so for the past 3 years, as I've realized that, like, for all of my customers to be able to answer this question of how secure are you, I need to find a way to make it easier to be able to do assessments or offer assessments in that regard. And so yeah, I've created a framework for that, and I can talk about that a little bit later. But really, that's the only question, or the only answer to this question is, well, what did your assessment tell you?
All right. So, when it comes down to it, cybersecurity is a team sport. Even if it's in one organization, and typically not, now for SMEs, it might be spread across a few organizations even. It comes down to really three pillars, okay? People, processes, and technology. And there are things within each of those areas that we need to do to make ourselves feel comfortable or confident that we actually are resilient. So on the people side, we tend to think about employee training first and foremost, and that's super important. And Matt has cybersecurity training solutions for you. Like a lot of the things we're talking about here, it's not one and done. You do need to periodically raise the profile of cybersecurity, and one of the things you're trying to do is, people tend to think of employees as the biggest vulnerability in an organization, and you want to switch that paradigm to making them your first line of defense. And that's about helping them recognize what cybercrime attempts look like, telling them what to do, and it's kind of like vaccinating them against cybercrime, right? So that they can see it, they can sense it. Okay, they're trying to bring urgency to a situation to get me to pay an invoice. So maybe it's not a real invoice, right? So that's super important. I also want to emphasize it's important for the leadership of an organization to be trained. It's understanding who does what in the case of an incident, what people's lanes are, and so on. Okay, and creating a culture of cybersecurity is super important as well, and that requires leadership. You may want to have someone, in your organization actually responsible for cybersecurity, and you want to normalize the idea that things do go wrong, because things go wrong all the time. Okay, and you want them reported, you want them brought forward so they can be dealt with, so they can be opportunities to learn, rather than, things that are punished and things that people might want to hide. Okay. And the other aspect when it comes to people is it's very, very difficult to find cybersecurity talent in 2024, and there is a skills shortage. So looking to get outside help is has merit for SMEs. Outside help can just augment you, can guide you, can actually become a full partner, and can do more than securing your network, can actually help you think about things like exercises, like incident response exercises, phishing exercises, that kind of thing. So there's a few threads there in people.
Yeah, with the people, I like the analogy of creating the human firewall, right? And that's what you're doing when your staff are properly trained. But also, what we communicate to our clients as we're onboarding them is, create this healthy sense of paranoia, but remove the stigma or the shame around asking for help or asking if there is something to be concerned about, right? Because we've seen it so many times where people just don't want to look stupid, so they follow the instructions of said compromised mailbox, and this is how the breaches happen, right? Because again, quite often the attacks or the breaches are from the mailbox of someone but there's a bad actor hiding in there, right? So yeah, you can't be shy. You can't have people hesitating on, hey, this doesn't seem right. Like, we gotta create a culture where they're good to move forward with asking about that stuff or surfacing it to us or someone at their office, right? Which actually, with the remote workspace too, you can see how this becomes more challenging, right? When somebody's just sitting at home, working from home by themselves, you can see how it's a little bit more feasible, or how it's a little more common that people kind of fall for this stuff, right? Because you're not like, hey, so and so, do you know about this? Did you send this? Whatever. Unless you reach out through other communication methods, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so the next pillar is around processes, and this is in between people and technology. It's about how you do things. So some examples of good cybersecurity procedures would be like, what do you do when an employee leaves your organization? Offboarding, right? When do you remove their accesses? When do you actually review the accesses of everyone in the organization? Because people's jobs change sometimes, and what they need to have access to, or what they need to be able to change, will change over time. So you need to do things like this. Cyber framework assessments, which Matt can help you with. It's that inward-looking exercise of saying, okay, where are we at today? That's a regular process thing that can be super useful. The third bullet here, vulnerability management, arguably the most important of all, which is that idea of updating your operating systems, updating your applications. There are constantly vulnerabilities being found in your software, and the vendors are constantly fixing them, but you can't take advantage of those fixes if you're not updating. And if you're not updating, then a cyber criminal can use it, something super basic, and we still see this happening today. Okay, so vulnerability management, super important. And finally, just this idea of documenting what you've done and understanding what your residual risk is. So if you're in a compliance framework, or if you have a cyber insurer coming to you and saying, show me what you did do to prevent this, that documentation is going to save you. Okay. And understanding your residual risk is super important as well, because it's like that real world, okay, here's where we are today.
Yeah, well, on the vulnerability management side, that was something that was kind of new to me too. We, for years, or ever since we started, patching is a thing. Of course, you do regular patching, but I was working with a cybersecurity consulting group a couple years ago when we had our first assessment, and they told me that, well, it's just like, okay, yes, fine, you're doing a good job of patching what you know, but what about everything you don't know that's out there, or something that's new? And so the whole concept of a vulnerability management system, we ended up implementing that for free across our entire client base 2 years ago, when I was told about how important this is, and it made sense to me. So we just did it because it was, he challenged me. He's like, this is table stakes for you as an MSP in his opinion. And I was like, all right, fine. I agree with you. Because yeah, it's now we're getting notified anytime there's a new device that enters the network or is detected that is running a vulnerable version of something. And we're also getting notified anytime a new vulnerability is released on a version that is running somewhere in the network, right? It's scanning the entire network, every device, every 4 hours for this kind of stuff. So yeah, it made a lot of sense to me. It's looking at it from a different perspective. But yeah, very important one.
Super. Okay, finally, technology. In 2024, you can have the best cybersecurity experts on the planet. If they don't have good technology to help them, you're still going to be vulnerable. So I've just identified a few things here that helps you understand tech-wise what good cybersecurity looks like. So first of all, 24/7 risk management and monitoring. Okay, I'll break that down. 24/7. Cyber criminals are operating on a 24/7 basis. Okay, and they move fast. So if something is happening at 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning, your posture needs to be reactive to that. And if you're not, by the time you get in on Monday morning, your enterprise could be a flaming wreck. So 24/7 is super important. Risk management is that idea, again, we talked on it a bit. It's understanding where you're vulnerable. Where are things unpatched? Where are there pieces of IT that have been snuck in? Where are there misconfigurations in cloud accounts? These things all happen all the time. And you can detect these and do something about them in advance to shrink that threat surface that Matt was talking about. And monitoring, this is the, watching what is happening with your systems, right? So you can see when a cyber criminal is doing something. It's not easy, but everything they do is observable, all right? So you can detect all of those things and you can block them. So early detection and blocking of threats, really critical, because you want to, you want to identify them. There's a whole series of things they're going to do in your network, and you're looking for the entire chain, but you want to detect it as early as possible and then block it, right? So that they can't move on. And defense in depth will get you that, but you want to detect it as soon as possible. Cloud services, integration with cloud services. This one's really important these days because, 10 years ago it wasn't a consideration, but lots of organizations use, M365 or Google Workspace, and there's lots of others. All of those services have lots of good security logging, right? Very verbose. You want a solution that's going to make sense of that along with everything else and tell you what matters. And finally, there are a bunch of architectural best practices that you can do, and this really gets in the weeds. We could do a sidebar on this, but there are things you can do just out of the gate to make your network much more secure. Multi-factor authentication, as an example, that would be one. So we're very close to wrapping up here, at least just the discussion part of it. So I'll sum up by saying, when it comes to visibility, you can't defend what you can't see. And what we bring to the table with Scout is 24/7 monitoring, detection, and response across your full environment. So by that I mean your endpoints, okay, your desktops, your laptops, your systems that are running and your servers running, Windows, Linux, Mac OS. So that's one aspect. Your network itself. Basically having visibility into the traffic going in and out of your network. And this is how we see, for example, rogue IT or IT that's been snuck in and things going on with them. And finally, those cloud services that we're all using. There are very important things to recognize about what's going on there. Because if a cyber criminal gets into your cloud tenant, it's just like they're getting into your workstation. Okay, they get in there, they can start doing things, they can change mail rules, they can bring all your information out, they can lock you out, same kind of challenges. So you want visibility into all of these things, but that's not all. You want another part, which Matt can help you with.
Yeah, so again, a little bit of the backstory. I actually met Field Effect almost exactly a year ago at a trade show in our industry out in Florida last year. And I've been like I mentioned earlier, when I had our first assessment 3 years ago, I was exposed to that. I was just like, how the heck am I going to be able to make this more accessible for all of our clients? Because this is the only way we can answer the question of how secure are they, right? But at the same time, as the threat landscape's been evolving, and as I've been pushing further into the cyber assessment framework for ourselves and tightening up our security. The other challenge was, in order to provide the various layers of protection, like Pat's outlined here, previous to me meeting Field Effect, we had to, in my industry, we had to cobble together enterprise offerings from usually multiple different ones in order to provide a unified solution for our customers. But for the SME, small medium enterprise space, that's not really cost effective and it's clunky. And so it was a challenge, right? So for a number of years, it held me up on being able to provide a solution to our customers of, hey, this is how you can get up to this good, secure stance, how we can help you get there. It was just too expensive for me to cobble together SentinelOnes and CrowdStrikes and whatever and have them all managed by a different SOC, and it was a gong show. So when I met Field Effect last year, that was a huge game changer, because they, first of all, have a similar philosophy to me of trying to simplify this stuff for people under cybersecurity. But with their unique history, they saw the gap in the market for the SME space. And so they created an offering which, bundles together all of those different components, but all from one provider, from one security operations center that's 24/7. They're getting insights from all the different angles, all from their one piece of software. So that was the final piece, really, for us, which enabled us just earlier this year to be able to refine our offering and finally get this cleared up, right? And so we're able to provide this high level of cybersecurity included or on top of our existing support managed services that we do. But then the other gap was still, okay, but we still need to be able to do assessments quickly and easily for our customers to help them along with this journey. And so that's the other thing that I'm excited to be kind of sharing here or talking about here is I created an entirely new sort of assessment framework along the lines of cyber hygiene. So that's a kind of a term that's been used in the industry now, which I appreciate. And, about a year ago, it gave me the idea of, okay, well, let's compare cyber hygiene practices to personal hygiene practices. Let's see if we can come up with some analogies here, to try to simplify it, to make it more relatable. So that's what we ended up creating. So we've got 11 categories that are relatable to think about this stuff, but it's built on top of the actual CIS framework. So I'm able to bring the real security assessment framework to my customers with easier to understand concepts and just much more simplified. Because I'm telling you, I've seen the ones that these big accounting companies and stuff like that produce, and they give you like a 40-page report for their assessment, and it's great, but it's too much. Like, I mean, really, all you really want to know is, where do I stand against this industry accepted best practice framework, and what are the next steps that make the most sense for me to do? And that's exactly what our report does for you, right? So here's just a little snapshot to give you an idea, right? Once we onboard with the new customer on this, we have a survey, so we get an idea of what your baseline score against the CIS framework was before we started with you, and then the first report you get shows where you're at now after we've implemented field effect and all the best practices and all the stuff that we do as part of our offering. And then, like I said, on the full report, you're going to have an executive summary, kind of highlighting our findings, and there's going to be your top 3 next steps. That's it. You can go into all the detail later if you'd like. There's all the detail, but really that's the meat of what needs to happen to keep our clients continuing making progress on their journey, because it is a journey, right? Like, cybersecurity is always evolving too, right? I dread the day when the next version of this CIS framework comes out. I'm sure it's not going to take too long, because I remember version 7 was a few years ago, and now it's version 8. Anyways, again, because cybersecurity evolves, but we simplify that because our framework will still be the same to you, but we may have to update what's behind the scenes, right? So, and yeah, sorry, the next one here. There you go. This kind of sums up what we're all about here, right? So, like I said, when I met Field Effect, that was something that we aligned on right away. I don't see this message out there much. I don't see people trying to simplify it for you. I see people trying to scare you into it. But that's not what we're all about here, right? So we're on a mission to simplify cybersecurity. That's what Field Effect and Scout are all about. So I think at that we can move into the Q&A. Thank you for coming. I don't know if there is anything posted so far. Was there anything you wanted to add, Pat, in closing?
No, I just think, listen, cybersecurity is complicated. And our message is, while it is complicated, it doesn't have to be complicated for you. We can shoulder that complexity as a team for you. And the reason that message is important is because we want you to focus on your business. We want your IT people to be focused on running your IT and not worrying about the cybersecurity. We take that on. We work with Scout and them, and it's a team effort.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, Jen, was there any questions surfaced or?
It looks like you guys must have covered a lot of what they were interested in wanting to know. So I think this has been good. Oh, there is something coming up. Yes, the recording will be available. So that is one of the questions.
I'll send a follow-up email probably next week with the recording and some other info as well. We're going to be kicking off a bit of a video series talking about that cyber hygiene framework that I mentioned. So anyway, some more stuff coming on that. It'll be in the communications. So
I can add one more thing, Matt.
sure.
And just very briefly, I think the mantra needs to be resilience. It is not about being perfect. So what I mean by that is we still see a lot of situations today where a single employee making a single mistake can bring a whole organization down, even a big one. And you want things to be configured such that if something goes wrong, it's a bad day for that employee, not a bad day for the organization. And it's that defense in depth will give you that. It'll give you resilience. That's that ability to take like a cyber punch and carry on, right?
Yeah.
And we're ready for a lot of other kind of disasters, fires, and all kinds of things, right? We have plans for that. We need to take cybersecurity, take the same approach with cybersecurity, so that it's not a big threat, so that it's just part of operating, and we carry on.
Yep. Unfortunately, it's a change. It's adding more to everybody's sort of role, but whatever. That's the world we're in. So on that positive note, wrap it up. Yeah, anyway, no, thanks for coming, everybody. And I'll send you the recording. And obviously, for those that are clients already, you've got Scott. Feel free to reach out to him with any questions. And for those that are not clients, you've got my email there. Feel free to reach out to me, and we can keep talking and see how we can help you out. Have a great day.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks for coming. Bye.
Bye now.